Imagine being reborn in a world reliant on one's skills, but when you awaken with a starless skill, your own family and village abandons you, forcing you to tame monsters and seek out others that are willing to accept you for who you are. The anime follows our MC Famisha fleeing her village at the dead of night, having escaped the capture of people from her own village by running off into the nearby forest. Traveling all night, Famisha heads to her designated hiding spot where she retrieves various bags and belongings she had prepared prior, only to start her own journey alone. Although Famisha tries unlocking various skills, she almost falls off a cliff when she pushes herself too far, so as she walks a little longer, she manages to find a dumping ground. Rummaging through the trash, she nearly gets punctured by the trash she uncovers. But having a stroke of luck, Famisha uncovers some spare clothing, a map, and some potions. With Famisha stocking up on whatever she can, she suddenly hears a beast tamer calling for his slimes to feed on the nearby garbage. And seeing as the man is hunting her as well, she rushes off into the shrubs nearby. The man suspects that Famisha must have fled to the nearest village of Latov. But worst of all, the head of Famisha's home village, Latami Village, had put a bounty on the poor girl. Seeing no reason to remain here, Famisha continues her journey through various terrains, all while sleeping where she can. But whilst heading through a lake, she is frightened by the slimes living in the water. Luckily, they aren't hostile, so she continues on her way, making her way through another forest, only to slip and slide off a nearby cliff, but it seems one of her bags snatching onto a nearby tree saved her. Making use of one of the potions she found, she declares it to be too old, seeing as it doesn't heal her wounds fully. So as she makes use of a cleaner potion, she chooses to take in the gorgeous scenery. Needing to wash off, Famisha leaves her belongings on land only to leap into the nearby river, completely captivated by the calm and serene water submerging her. Having made up her mind, Famisha declares she'll do whatever it takes to survive, and having been advised by a fortune teller to change her identity, Famisha begins cutting down her long hair. Making use of the clothing she found, Famisha declares she'll be called Ivy moving forward, plus she'll pretend to be a boy to ensure her safety, continuing her journey as she racks up more things to live off. Passing by some tall grass, Ivy takes some time to admire the small slimes living on the grass, even flicking through her monster compendium to confirm that the slime she discovered is a rare breed. Ivy is excited to have met a slime that is the weakest of its kind, a reflection for her own status, and before she can name the creature, a small gust of wind blows it off from its resting place. Chasing after the slime, Ivy feels empathy for the poor creature, and seeing as it needs help getting up, Ivy lends it a helping hand. Reading up on the slime, Ivy sees that the slime is so weak that its lifespan is less than 1 day. Therefore, there is little to no knowledge on the creature. Out of nowhere, another gust of wind sends the slime flying, but refusing to let the little creature perish. Ivy rushes to its side, even diving to protect it from disappearing into the nearby lake. With the sun setting, Ivy promises to protect the slime until it vanishes, even laying by its side throughout the night as she feels bad for weak slime. Unable to communicate with it, Ivy simply utters that the humans in her world of Ortegas are given skills when they turn 5, with her father granted a 2-star carpentry and processing skill, whilst her mother was given a 2-star needlework and 1-star mending skill. With the greater the skill determined by the higher number of stars, Ivy was randomly given the taming skill, but sadly, it was a starless skill. Immediately, Ivy's family and village turned on her and banished her. But strangely, Ivy still has memories of her past life. Ivy does mention how she ran into a very helpful fortune teller that gave her lots of books and taught her various things. And before the fortune teller passed, they gifted Ivy a magic bag that can store lots of things without getting heavy. Ivy begins to break down, seeing as she truly is alone in this world, crying that it's unfair she was born into this weak body. But Ivy does admit that her slime friend has it worse than her. Seeing as they don't have long together, Ivy declares the slime to be her first friend. But as we cut to the next morning, we see Ivy awaken to discover her slime friend is no longer by her side. Feeling the morning breeze brush up along her, Ivy can't help but feel betrayed by the gods that govern the world, falling onto her knees only to suppress her dark emotions like she always has. Remembering that the fortune teller had advised her to visit the capital, Ivy chooses to check the map she found, but surprisingly her slime friend is seen hiding between the folded map. Rushing to free the slime, Ivy says this is her first stroke of luck, and upon heading into the nearby forest, Ivy reads up on how to tame her first monster. Apparently, tamers must pass magical energy into the creatures they want to tame, and if the creature accepts the tamer can freely name the monster, and a mark will appear to signal a successful procedure. Wanting to change her life for the better, Ivy puts her Starless Tamer skill to work, focusing in only to imbue a little amount of magic into the small slime. As the slime glows, Ivy declares the slime's name will be Sora after the vast blue sky above them. And with Sora accepting Ivy as their master, Ivy declares this is her first step to carve out a future she desperately wants. In the coming days, we see Ivy setting up traps to capture field mice to keep her satiated, only to work on prepping the mice for future meals. Taking out her map, Ivy says that from her home village of Latami, she needs to head to the royal capital, but first she should stop at Ottawa village. With a gust of wind blowing, Ivy rushes to hold Sora down from floating away, but suddenly Ivy hears several beings approaching her. Stuffing Sora into her bag and running into the forest, Ivy begins climbing up a tree to hide, only to be horrified to see huge ants rummaging around for her. After a while, Ivy climbs down the tree once the ants have disappeared, noting how they need to be more careful seeing as other monsters may be around. Ivy does wonder if Sora has gotten a little bigger, but seeing as she got a scratch on her face whilst running through the forest, Ivy chooses to use up the remainder of her old blue potions to patch up her wound. Ivy could have sworn she had more blue potions, but regardless, our duo continue their journey towards the nearest village to restock, only to encounter a wanted poster of her strung up. Ivy says 500 Dao coins is a bit excessive for her capture, so Ivy tries taking down as many wanted posters of herself as she can, finally making it to the entrance of Latoto village. Placing Sora in her bag, Ivy heads through town whilst concealing her face, but immediately Ivy gets jealous seeing so many villagers using magic. Passing by a family with the sprint skill, search skill, and intimidation skill, Ivy locks onto a bakery and butcher nearby, yearning for some fresh food. Hesitant, Ivy passes by the butcher wondering if she can sell the mice she caught, but immediately the butcher declares he can smell Ivy has caught some fresh field mice with his 2-star odor skill. With the meat nicely preserved, the butcher agrees to purchase all of Ivy's meat for 100 coins, promising to do further business with Ivy if she has any future mice to sell. With money in hand, Ivy heads over to inspect the fresh bread in the bakery, but the owner asks if she can help Ivy with anything. Ivy makes up a lie and says she is visiting some relatives, so the owner helps Ivy pick out some bread, exciting Ivy as she leaves the village to devour her first real meal. Interestingly, Sora isn't a fan of the bread, and as we cut to the next day, Ivy celebrates a successful hunt as she caught plenty of mice. Coincidentally, Ivy runs into another garbage dump filled with various potions, but sadly they seem to all be quite old. When Ivy begins separating the good and bad potions, she is surprised to see Sora devour and dissolve only the blue potions whole, a skill only high-tier slimes are capable of. Sadly, Sora refuses to dissolve just any trash and only agrees to swallow up the blue potions. And as the day goes on, we see Ivy cashing in her mice for 250 coins only to purchase some more bread. Choosing to wash off in a lake, Ivy munches on some bread while she feeds Sora some more potions, a scenario Ivy wishes she could relive forever. Upon heading back to town, Ivy runs into adventurers that she recognizes as they were hunting her prior, and when the men ask to see Ivy's magic bag, she simply flees without uttering a word. Luckily, it seems they don't recognize her, and as Ivy passes by the butcher, she is horrified to see her wanted poster plastered beside his store. Sadly, when Ivy visits the baker, she notices another one of her flyers, making her run off to rest in a tree as it seems she can no longer remain in the village. Departing the next day, Ivy runs into a fork in the road, and sadly our duo are beginning to get hungry, making Ivy regret not picking up any last-minute supplies. Following the sound of water, Ivy manages to uncover a lake with several fruit growing nearby. But as she approaches the fruit tree, she is horrified to see the tree spitting out the adventurers she had met prior. With the tree whipping and lashing out towards Ivy, Ivy runs for dear life, but having sustained some damage, Ivy begins to faint. With no potions at her disposal, Ivy can only cry for Sora to flee, but strangely, Sora begins to wrap around Ivy's injured arm, all whilst Ivy falls unconscious. Flashing back, we follow Tableau checking on his wife Furef after she had given birth to Ivy, and whilst growing up, Ivy would retrieve meals for her father and brother Phaeton to eat. Phaeton would scold Ivy for eating so much, but Ivy simply enjoyed eating with her family. And as the sun began to set, our trio would return to Furef and Facilia, who would already be preparing dinner. Ivy would always be treated quite well, seeing as she was the youngest child. Plus, Facilia had the one-star soothing skill to help enhance meals and make people's fatigue go away. With Ivy almost turning 5, the family would gather and spend time building up their house, and occasionally Furef would dream of the days her 2 daughters would get married. Ivy had heard that gaining a valuable skill is the most important thing in the world, seeing as Phaeton's 3-star furniture-making skill will ensure he has a good future. And with Ivy wishing to be a powerful tamer one day, the family are suddenly interrupted by Mistress Luba, the fortune teller who has come to wish Ivy luck for her upcoming skill selection. In the past, Furef would seek Luba's advice on how Ivy spoke, seeing as she spoke of a past life. But Luba had secretly advised Ivy to keep her past life's memories a secret from others. In the present, Luba makes use of her 1-star foresight skill to confirm that Ivy's future skill is quite amazing, but sadly Luba can't confirm anything else. On the big day, we see Ivy accompanied by Tableau and Furef to get her skill unlocked, and with the priest of the village helping Ivy retrieve her skill via a ritual, he announces that Ivy has acquired the Tamer skill. With everyone excited, the priest suddenly detects something strange with Ivy, and upon seeing that her skill is starless, the priest cries out that Ivy has been abandoned by the gods. That evening, we see Tableau drinking away his sorrows as he angrily cries that it is impossible for his own daughter to be starless. And to make things worse, Tableau begins to wonder if Ivy really is his daughter. With the family falling apart, Ivy is ordered to leave their home. And as Ivy wanders alone through town, the village chief gathers up other villagers to warn them of Ivy's existence. Immediately, Ivy is ostracized by the very people she grew up with, and feeling dejected and unwanted, Ivy is forced to flee into the nearby forest. With it raining, Ivy is forced to stuff herself with wild berries and take shelter in a cave, and when Ivy tries starting a fire with the little magic she has, she ultimately fails and collapses. Luckily, Luba had come to assist her, reminding Ivy that she shouldn't strain herself due to her weak magic energy, and sadly Luba apologizes as she had already foresaw Ivy would be abandoned. Choosing to feed the poor girl, Luba offers up a magic bag and some books to help advance Ivy's knowledge for a better chance at survival. Plus, Luba advises that Ivy head to the village neighboring the royal capital. Luba says the day Ivy finds the people she can trust, Ivy must tell them about her starless skill to ensure they are people Ivy can trust. Plus, Luba promises to visit and teach Ivy as much as she can. Over time, Ivy gets used to living in the wild, and with 3 years passing, Ivy has taken a liking to scrummaging through garbage dumps in search of useful goods. As for food, Ivy had learned how to catch mice and fish, but out of nowhere, Ivy rushes to hide as she hears people coming. Hearing something is wrong, Ivy returns to the village's church, only to hear the news of Luba's passing, something that explains why Luba hasn't been visiting her as often. Creepily, Ivy listens in on a meeting between her father and the village head, where both men agree to hunt down Ivy and return her to the gods. Immediately, the village chief had rallied together with the townspeople and blamed Luba's passing on Ivy, cursing her. And with the witch hunt beginning, Ivy had no choice but to leave her former life behind in search of a new one. Waking up from her nightmare, Ivy catches glimpses of the starry night sky, and seeing Sora adorably clinging to her arm, Ivy once again falls asleep. The next day, we see Ivy awaken to Sora nudging her, surprised to see that Sora had actually healed her scar. Additionally, it seems Sora can now make faint noises, an achievement that makes Ivy tear up as she promises to live on and continue enjoying life with Sora. Waking up bright and early the next day, we see Sora squealing for Ivy to get up, both excitedly greeting the morning sun. First off, Ivy serves Sora some blue potions while she munches on some berries, surprising Ivy to see Sora has grown more sturdy. Seeing as they're running low on fruits, Ivy says she'll have to stock up on meat when she visits the village of Tames, and sadly cooking the mice she catches will only draw in the attention of nearby monsters. Seeing as Sora is still hungry, our duo venture around and stumble onto a garbage dump, and upon uncovering some funky-looking potions, Ivy begins feeding Sora old-looking blue potions. Interestingly, Sora is now willing to eat red potions as well, and upon mixing several potions together to make them either red or blue for Sora to devour, Ivy eventually continues along her journey. Along the way, Ivy makes a pit stop to stock up on some no-berries, food that Sora refuses to eat, and as the sun begins to set, we see our duo dining on some dinner. When Sora finishes their potions, it begs for more, but fearing that Sora will eat all of her potions, Ivy declares she'll tell Sora a bedtime story to put it to sleep. High up in a tree, Ivy recounts a story about a war in the past involving a king gathering a bunch of magicians to help win a war, but when the magicians peered into the future, they foresaw the end of the world. As a countermeasure, the magicians pulled together their powers to conjure an incredible spell that would avoid such a future. And legend has it that only a child from another world can recreate such a spell in case tragedy strikes again. Having fallen asleep to her own story, Ivy apologizes as she couldn't remember the rest of the story, and sadly Sora had devoured all of the potions Ivy was saving for herself. Getting to work, Ivy sets up various traps to hunt down mice, but in one of her traps, Ivy stumbles onto a snake. Frightened, Ivy makes use of a spare cloth to capture and seal the snake, and whilst heading through a forest, Ivy moves toward a strange smell nearby. Entering into a clearing, Ivy is alerted when she spots a carriage has been flipped, and upon stuffing Sora in her bag, Ivy unfortunately discovers that everyone involved had passed away. Freaked out, Ivy begins to mindlessly flee the scene, choosing to run off in a random direction, and not before long, Ivy spots the town of Tames in the distance. Entering into town, Ivy wonders where she can report the incident, choosing to head into the town hall only to see some adventurers chatting with the receptionist. When Ivy asks for help, the adventurers says Ivy should take her captured snake to an apothecary in town, but Ivy cries that she discovered some dead bodies on her way to town. Immediately, the news catches everyone's attention, prompting the guard chief to approach Ivy only to ask Ivy to recount everything she saw. When Ivy says the carriage she saw seemed ravaged and the belongings of the deceased weren't stolen, the chief declares it couldn't have been bandits, prompting everyone in the hall to begin making preparations to retrieve the corpses and hunt down the monsters. The chief and receptionist thank Ivy for the valuable intel, handing Ivy a document she can cash in later once they confirm what Ivy had said is true. Later that day, Ivy heads to the town's apothecary, and seeing as the snake is a female, the apothecary agrees to pay Ivy 3 jidal coins, the equivalent of catching 30 field mice. Seeing as they have time, Ivy chooses to visit a nearby garbage dump in search of leftover potions, and strangely Ivy stumbles on various magic bags that have been thrown away. As Sora eats its fill of potions, we see Ivy trying to stuff the magic bags inside one another, and after some trial and error, Ivy splits the magic bag into 4 groups. Apparently, some bags can hold up to 3 magic bags whilst others can't hold any, and as Ivy continues to figure out a way to stuff each magic bag into each other, we notice Sora continues to feed on the potions lying around. Having successfully figured out a way to carry all the bags, we see our duo heading back through town, but Ivy notices a crowd has formed in town. Out of nowhere, the guard chief calls out to Ivy grateful that her information led them to discover that various ogres and an ogre king was lurking outside their town, and now the town's adventurers are being sent to deal with the monsters. With the chief telling Ivy to head to the town hall to pick up her reward, Ivy greets the receptionist, only to comically raffle through her magic bags, only to hand back the document she received earlier. As a reward, the receptionist hands Ivy a silver tablet for discovering the corpses, the same amount as 5 Jidal coins or 50 mice, and to top things off, Ivy is rewarded 2 gold coins for the monster discoveries, an amount equivalent to 200 field mice. With Ivy nervous to accept the rewards, she heads through town all whilst carrying her magic bags. And with night falling, we see Ivy set up camp in town alongside other townsfolk, seeing as the forest outside is still too dangerous. With Latome Village being their next stop, Ivy says she's excited for things to come as things have been going her way recently. The next day, Ivy sees that one of her traps had been broken by accident, and with Sora running through the forest, Ivy follows after it, having smelt some blood as well. Behind some shrubs lies an Adandara, a rare monster that seems to be greatly wounded, and with the creature crying out in pain, Ivy can't help but feel sympathy for it. Before Ivy gives up hope on saving the dying soul, we see Sora suddenly spring into action as it suddenly covers the Adandara with his ooze, only to begin healing it. Not before long, Sora returns to Ivy's arms, confirming that the healing was a success. Instantly, the Adandara begins to approach Ivy, but luckily it is friendly as it begins cuddling up against Ivy. Ivy says it normally takes 5 high-ranked adventurers to slay such a scary creature, but seeing as the monster before them is so passive, Ivy agrees to let it tag along with her. Ivy says she would have loved to tame the creature if she had more magic, but sadly, she can only settle for naming the creature, opting to call the Adandara Seal. With introductions done, our trio continue on their pathing, and with Sora able to hide in Ivy's bag, Seal runs off into the forest as Ivy makes it to the next nearest town. At the entrance, Ivy is frightened by the scary-looking town guard, and coincidentally, another visitor seems to be visiting the same time Ivy is. When the man approaches the entrance, Ogudo, the town's army captain, demands to know why the man is visiting. And when the man says he is visiting a friend in town, Ogudo calls his bluff. Pinning the man against the wall, Ogudo rips open the man's bag, only to discover some illegal alcohol the man was trying to smuggle into town. Calling for his vice captain, Varivara is asked to lock the man up, and having just witnessed everything, Ivy begins to get nervous. Calming herself, Ivy soldiers on towards the gate, but is stopped by Ogudo, who asks who Ivy is, but Ivy takes the chance to help point out the bug that has landed on Ogudo's shoulder. Having defused the tense situation, Ivy utters that she hails from Latome Village, surprising Ogudo as he reports that there have been bad things happening at Latome Village. But regardless, Ogudo says Ivy should be safe now that she has arrived at Latome. Upon heading into town, Ivy is swept away by the various stores present, wondering if it's because they are near Ottawa. First things first, Ivy visits the butcher to purchase some dried meat, and with Ivy confirming that the butcher will purchase any meat she hunts, the butcher warns Ivy to be careful of the giant Nanoshi boar in the forest. Seeing as the boar may be the one destroying her traps, Ivy reasons she should rest in town for the night, only to head to the resting area for the townsfolk. Amazed by the vast resting area, Ivy gets scared seeing Roygord watching over the location, and with careful steps, Ivy asks if she can rest here for the night. With Roygord assigning Ivy a location and a permit, Ivy hears she needs to keep her permit to enter and exit, and with no payment needed, Ivy gets set up by placing down a mat to lay on. Ivy gets jealous seeing others with tents, and seeing as Sora wants to move around as well, Ivy heads back into town to look for a tent. With Ivy stumbling onto a store selling secondhand tents, she wonders how much each tent will cost, but suddenly she bumps into Ogudo, who asks what Ivy is doing. Hearing that Ivy is looking for a tent to buy, Ogudo and Varivara are saddened to see a mere child without a tent. So Ogudo declares he'll show Ivy to an old man that will solve her needs. With Ogudo dragging Ivy along, Ogudo greets Old Man Lag, only to show off Ivy. Upon hearing that Ivy is from Latami village and needs a tent, Lag agrees to build something for the poor child, asking if Ivy wants a light tent or a functional tent. Sadly, Ivy isn't too sure, as she says she can pay with silver or gold, but this surprises Ogudo as he learns Ivy had received the money by completing a quest in the previous town. With a budget of 5 jidal, Lag shows off a second-hand tent that is still in pristine condition, an item that used to belong to Lazy Joya, and it is quite light and high quality. With Lag instructing Ivy to mark the tent to claim the item as hers, Ivy instinctively writes the symbol for Sora on the tent. And as a bonus, Lag hands Ivy a magic bag to help conceal the amount of money Ivy is carrying around. As Ogudo and Varivara head back to their patrol, we follow Ivy gleefully pitching her tent in the resting area, only to head inside and let Sora out of her bag. Instantly, Sora takes a liking to the amount of space and privacy they have, and seeing as it's still light out, Ivy says they'll head in search of a garbage dump to restock on potions. As Ivy heads outside, she runs into 4 adventurers chatting, but upon seeing Ivy all alone, one of the men accuses Ivy of stealing their tent. When Ivy stands up for herself, the men begin to get aggressive as they accuse Ivy of lying and stealing their tent, and when one of the ladies begins sifting through Ivy's bags, they stumble on Sora hiding inside. When Ivy tries to flee, the men begin to get aggressive, but Roygord appears demanding to know what happened. Immediately, the men cry that Ivy stole their goods, but without hesitating, Roygord forces the men to unhand Ivy, revealing that Ogudo was the one who helped Ivy pick out the tent. Realizing they've made a mistake, the 4 adventurers ask to brush things aside, seeing as they were mistaken, but Roygord insists they come with him, even ordering for backup to restrain the 4 cocky adventurers. Roygord apologizes for what Ivy had to go through, revealing that Ogudo had actually stopped by and asked Roygord to look out for Ivy, and seeing as he wasn't able to help sooner, Roygord gives Ivy a brand new blue potion as a token of his apology. That night, Ivy and Sora enjoy a well-earned meal, but before our duo dig in, Sora begs to dine on the new blue potion Ivy had received, something Ivy can't allow. Waking up at the break of dawn, Ivy informs Roygord that she'll be hunting, but as she makes her way out of town, she wonders why every guard seems to know her name and is treating her so kindly. Outside, Ivy sees that her traps are still being trampled on, but out of nowhere Seal arrives to hand out some bunnies they've caught. With 9 bunnies in total, Ivy gets to work harvesting and packaging them up, all while Seal and Sora nap under a tree. When it's time to sell off the meat, Seal snuggles and bids Ivy farewell, leaving our duo to head back to town. Ivy says Sora has grown quite tough, and with Ivy selling her meat to the butcher agrees to purchase them for 855 dal. Grateful for Seal's help, Ivy is once again greeted by the guard she runs into, choosing to hide in the alley to figure out why everyone knows her. With Varivara stumbling onto Ivy, Ivy tells Varivara about the men greeting her, but Varivara reveals that it's probably Ogudo who has warned his men to look out for Ivy. Although Ivy is grateful for the help, she still doesn't want to stand out too much, but in the corner of her, as she spots a store selling expensive Zero fruits. The storekeeper said he had to procure the fruits from Latami village, surprised to hear that Ivy is from Latami, mentioning how horrible it was that the village head had run their town into the ground. Apparently Luba was the one helping the town harvest and sell the Zero fruits as it was their main source of income. But when Luba fell ill, the village head refused to help Luba, ultimately leading Luba to pass away. Ivy is completely shocked to hear that the village is no longer habitable as many have rebelled or fled for their own survival. And seeing as Ivy was a kid kicked out of Latami village, the shopkeeper hands Ivy a Zero on the house. That evening, Ivy reflects on her life up until now, pointing out how strange it was for her village and family to despise her whilst the people in town seem to have welcomed her with open arms. As Ivy dines on the Zero, she remembers the fortune teller's advice to make friends and find a home where she can live, agreeing to do the best she can. The next day, Ivy continues her morning routine of greeting the guards and heading into the nearby forest to set up traps. But before she can head back to town, Two of the adventurers the other day appear, having escaped capture. When the man orders Ivy to hand over her belongings, Ivy refuses, beginning to sprint off only to lead the man into one of her traps. As for the woman, she manages to intercept Ivy, buying enough time for the man to catch up and restrain her. As the two crooks begin snooping through Ivy's belongings, they suddenly freeze upon seeing Seal appear, and with a single roar, Seal puts the woman to sleep. When the man tries fleeing, Seal easily blitzes after the man, knocking him out alongside the woman. Ivy graciously thanks Seal for watching over her, and with some more people approaching, Seal rushes to hide only for Ogudo and Varivara to appear. Baffled to see Ivy had found the two missing criminals, Ogudo reports to Ivy that the four adventurers that hassled Ivy the other day are wanted criminals who bully weaker adventurers, and worst of all, there is evidence that they may be murderers. Ogudo declares the criminals will be made slaves for life, and seeing as Ivy was the one who helped capture the criminals, Ogudo announces that Ivy will be paid 2 ladle and 3 jidal coins, an amount equivalent to capturing 5,000 mice. Worried that Ivy may be carrying around a large amount of money, Ogudo says he'll show Ivy how to open a bank account at the trade guild. And with Ogudo standing as Ivy's guarantor, we see Ivy opening an account using her blood. With the account, Ogudo sees that Ivy is turning 9 soon, and as Ivy deposits her funds, she receives a plate as proof of her deposit. Ivy is so thankful for all Ogudo has done for her, but funnily Varivara is pissed that Ogudo left without informing him what he was doing. But regardless, the men take Ivy out to eat some signature boar skewers as a celebration. Ivy is surprised by the amount of warmth she is feeling, all three heading to greet the lady manning the skewer stand, only for Ogudo to order no-berry ciders along with 10 skewers for each of them. Although Ivy is hesitant she'll be able to finish 10 skewers, she is beckoned to try her first skewer, only to be blown away by the succulent boar meat. It's revealed that the lady manning the stand has a 4-star cooking skill, and interestingly, 2 of the criminals that were caught had a 3-star sprinting skill, leading Ogudo to ask what starred skill Ivy has. Suddenly feeling her stomach drop, Ivy musters up the courage to reveal she has a Tamer skill, but before she can utter her star level, Ogudo and Varivara stop Ivy. Both men utter that the star level of one skill doesn't dictate their usefulness. Using the criminals as examples, they had high star levels, but were worthless human beings, words that melt Ivy's heart. With it being time for Ivy to leave, she promises to return and visit when she's grown stronger, news that excites Ogudo. When Ivy leaves, Varivara reveals that Ivy was given the rank of 1 when evaluated the lowest possible score, and when Varivara searched Ivy in their name database, no name turned up. Varivara deduces Ivy to be a runaway girl from Latomy, a sad revelation as the men realize Ivy was hiding her gender, name, and maybe an even greater secret. But regardless, the men simply wish that Ivy lives a fulfilling life, especially after everything she has gone through. Rushing through the forest, Ivy desperately sprints after the energetic Sora, only for a duo to stop for a break. But Ivy notes how Sora has been different ever since it healed Seal. Ivy wonders if Sora had evolved, but with Sora running off again, Ivy chases after the slime, only to uncover a patch of field completely decimated by boars. Before Ivy can wonder how big these boars are, she suddenly flinches as something sneaks up on her. But luckily, it is just Seal who earns himself a hug for scaring Ivy. That night, Ivy whips up some delicious rabbit skewers thanks to Seal's hunting, and with Ivy declaring she'll work hard to hunt some mice tomorrow, we pan out to see a hooded figure spying on our trio. The next morning, Ivy is saddened to see the traps she set up didn't yield any mice, and in the misty distance, Ivy suddenly detects a disturbing presence approaching her. With a strange dust cloud rushing towards Ivy, she chooses to flee the scene, and with Ivy cornered by the strange presence, Ivy turns to see a strange human silhouette buried in the dust cloud. Luckily, Seal appears growling for the presence to disappear, and with Seal helping Ivy travel across some steep terrain, Ivy fears what that person following her could be after. Out of nowhere, Seal begins to growl, having sensed an ogre climbing towards them from below, And to make things worse, a second ogre appears to intercept the trio's pathing. Immediately, Seal throws Ivy aside to deal with the ogre in front of them, and sadly Seal is forced to wrestle the ogre off the path and into the river below. Now alone, Ivy is horrified to see another army of ogres flooding her from above, forcing Ivy to sprint along the path. But strangely, she encounters a forest filled with strung-up wooden dolls. With the ogres hot on her tracks, Ivy has no choice but to courageously run into the strange-looking forest. But having fallen into a trap, Ivy is caught and strung up for the ogres to devour. Out of nowhere, a single burst of flames eradicates one of the ogres. And to follow up, Ratlua makes his grand appearance as he calls for a firestorm to consume the field in flames. When Ivy cries for help, Ratlua realizes he may have messed up, but luckily Shafal the archer helps cut Ivy free, allowing Ratlua to catch Ivy. With an ogre sneaking up on them, Ratlua swiftly flees the impact zone, only for two slimes to help soften their fall. Revealed to be Mira, who is also assisting the group, and with Mira retrieving her slimes, the gang turns to see Saijaku and Nuga rushing in to finish off the remaining ogres. When one final ogre tries sneaking up on the gang, Shafal rains down arrows to finish things off, only to scold Ratlua for setting up the trap, as it ultimately caught an innocent child instead of a monster. In the aftermath, the gang introduced themselves as the suppression squad sent to deal with the monsters roaming around the area, and sadly the gang apologized, seeing as Ivy got caught in one of their traps. With Saijaku introducing himself as the leader, Mira reveals that she is from the Green Gale that had tagged along for the monster hunt, intriguing Ivy as she asks to tag along with the gang. Happy to oblige, they all begin to make their way to the camp at the foot of the mountain, only for Ivy to mention how she is traveling to Ottawa from the Latome village. The gang are surprised that a mere child made it so far, especially since their 5-man army also came from Latome village, so the gang invites Ivy to travel with them. Reaching a cliff, the gang point out the mini settlement they and other adventurers had set up, but before Ivy can follow the gang, she is glad to see Seal is fine. Fearing that Seal may be deemed a dangerous creature, Ivy signals for Seal to run away from the camp, only for Ivy to join up with the others. At camp, Ivy hears that many different adventurers have gathered in their location, plus there's monster repellent to ward off any creatures. Taking Ivy to their blazing sword tent, the gang allow Ivy to set up camp next to theirs, and with Mira returning to her own tent, Ivy and Ratlua are left alone as the other men head to plan their next monster hunt. It's revealed that Ratlua is staying behind because he is cooking duty, but he is quite discouraged as in the past the others had criticized his cooking for being quite terrible. Something Ivy finds out is because Ratlua simply torches the food with his 3-star flame skill only to barely season the food. With Ivy able to help out in the cooking department, she gets to work seasoning and frying the rabbit meat. They have only to stew it alongside some vegetables. As for bigger cuts of meat, Ivy fries them outright, and with Ivy going all out to impress the gang, we see the men return for a nice dinner together. Instantly, the boys begin to cry at how delicious Ivy's cooking is, something Ivy is surprised by, as it seems the men haven't had a decent meal in a while. With Mira smelling the amazing food, she joins the gang only to be blown away by Ivy's cooking, but the gang demand to know if Ratlua forced Ivy to do all the cooking. Luckily, Ivy covers for Ratlua, leading Ratlua to thank Ivy by showing off the fireworks he can create with his flame skill. Captivated by the fireworks, Ivy asks if the gang have spare metals lying around, leading Mira to show off an assortment of metals for broken weapons and equipment. With the metals, she chooses to wrap them up with some rabbit bone and salts, and when Ratlua tosses them into the sky and ignites them, the gang are pleasantly surprised to see a spectrum of colors fill the night sky. With the camp also enjoying the light show, we cut to later that night where the gang are cleaning up, but Ratlua can't help but find Ivy adorable for being so helpful. In her tent, Ivy feeds Sora some potions, only to clean up before she heads to bed. Following the others, we see the men saddened to see Ivy so mature at such a young age, all wondering what must have led Ivy to be so independent. In the morning, Ivy sees a designated area for trash to be thrown out, and before she can sift through the trash for some potions for Sora, Ivy runs into Mira. Mira shows off her two rare slimes that are fond of devouring swords. And it is quite well known that Tamers controlling rare slimes are highly regarded, explaining why Mira is so well treated by others. Ivy learns that a slime that can disintegrate things like Sora is unheard of, but out of nowhere Ivy begins to feel a strange presence observing her, something Mira takes note of. The tension is broken when the men of the camp ask Mira to dispose of their broken gear, and seeing as there is nothing left to do here, the men declare they'll be heading back to Ottawa, exciting Ivy. That night, Ivy gets to work whipping up some skewers, plus Ivy has some soup to help the men flush down the meal. Ivy does wonder what Seal has been up to, but with Ivy working through the night, the men check on her to see if she has eaten. Ivy reassures everyone she is already stuffed, but when Mira appears with her Green Gale party, she introduces Ivy to Tordo and Maruma, Myra's older twin brothers. Having heard great things, the twins offer to recruit Ivy in the future, but Ratlua says he wants to adopt Ivy as a sibling, a statement that forces Caesar to smack Ratlua on the head to stop him from being weird with Ivy. At that moment, another party approaches the gang, scaring Green Gale off, but the men are introduced as the Thunder King party with Barolda as their leader. Ratlua mentions how the twins aren't fond of Barolda, but regardless, Barolda is happy to see Ivy has been well, mentioning how it would be best for Ivy to head to Ottawa with everyone. Excited by the offer, Ivy rushes to her tent to feed Sora. But once again, Ivy is caught off guard when a strange presence approaches her tent. When Ratlua calls out to her, Ivy rushes to answer him, but it turns out Ratlua had only come to ask for Ivy's help cooking in the future. Ivy is more than happy to cook anytime the gang asks of her. But when Ivy returns to chatting with Sora, Ivy asks Sora if Ratlua seems suspicious. Sadly, Sora doesn't sense anything off with Ratlua nor anyone from the Flaming Sword Party. But when Ivy mentions Myra's name, Sora begins to freak out. In the coming days, we see Ivy entering Ottawa town with the help of the Flaming Sword Party, only for the town guard to ask for Ivy's details. When Ivy mentions how she is from Latomy Village and that Ogudo is her guarantor, the guard happily hands Ivy her permit to enter or leave the town. Entering town, Ivy is amazed by the vast city, and with the men showing Ivy to the resting area, they choose to set up a tent with Ivy as it would be more safe. That evening, the men sit down to have a chat with Ivy, revealing that there are dangerous humans belonging to an organization in the area that have been abducting and selling people as slaves. Although the evil organization was raided by the town, it seems someone leaked the information and the evildoers were able to escape, and that is why the men are staying by Ivy's side to protect her. Ivy is freaked out as the men seem to be on high alert. But when Ivy mentions how she was chased right before meeting everyone, the men perk up as they make use of a magic item to erect a barrier. That way they can continue chatting without being monitored. Ivy continues by declaring that a sickening presence has tried sneaking up on her, but a monster from the forest scared it away. The second occurrence was in her tent, but luckily Ratlua appeared and scared it away. With this intel, the men deduce that a member in their camp must be a traitor, and when Ivy mentions how she got weird vibes from Mira, the men ask if Ivy has evidence to back up her claims. Tensing up, Ivy knows that Sora's existence is quite rare, so to keep Sora safe, Ivy says she has no proof. That night, Ivy asks Sora if she should tell the men of its existence, and seeing as Luba did instruct Ivy to find allies she can trust, Ivy begins to wonder if these are the people she should trust. Waking up early the next day, Ivy heads to prepare breakfast, but Caesar and the others ask Ivy to chat as they had found evidence of Mira along with her brothers doing something sketchy. Last night, the men had gone to check up on Mira, but they stumbled on Mira and her brothers chatting with a sketchy merchant, all whilst using a similar noise-dampening magic item. When the boys had asked the town's trades guild about the sketchy merchant, they were unable to find out anything about the man, evidence that makes Mira and her brothers even more suspicious. The men seem to still be in disbelief, but seeing as their sources point to Green Gale being suspicious, they agree to look out for Mira moving forward. Ivy is caught off guard as the men seem to have taken in her opinion as if it were their own. But the men remind Ivy that they know she is a kind soul and is someone they can trust, traits they picked up in the time they've been with her. Overcome with joy, Ivy cries that she is actually a Tamer and it was her slime that sensed danger for Mira. With the men surprised, Ivy chooses to show off Sora to everyone. And upon seeing Sora's translucent body, they realize that Sora is a very rare slime. Flattered that Ivy would reveal to them such a secret, the men swear to keep Ivy's secret safe with them, something Ivy and Sora appreciates as she truly has met people she can trust. Seeing how adorable Sora is, Rickbert immediately tries snuggling with Sora, but Shafal helps drag Rickbert away. With the gang wondering if Sora can discern all lies, Rickbert asks Sora if his name is Ratlua, but instantly Sora detects that it is a lie. When Lokrik asks if Merrick stole Shafal's wine last night, Sora confirms it to be the truth, something that earns Merrick a beating. Sitting down for a meal, the men report that they haven't been able to make contact with the Green Gale party, and it's depressing since Ratlua has been friends with Mira for a long time and Rickbert is quite close with the brothers. Apparently, the kidnappings started 10 years ago, but when some of the kids that were kidnapped escaped, the truth of the kidnappers' existence came to light. With so much time passing, the gang suspect that there must be greater masterminds working behind the scenes, and when the town raided the previous hideout, many were slaughtered due to the kidnappers knowing of the raid ahead of time. Weirdly, Green Gale didn't learn of the raid up until the raid itself. Plus, it was a noble that had endorsed the Green Gale party after they helped the noble solve something. Ivy deduces that the noble must be in cahoots with the kidnappers, something both the Flaming Sword men and Thunder King men agree with, seeing as the noble once tried recruiting their parties to do a special job as well. On a complete tangent, the men realize that it is Ivy's birthday today, all cheering and clapping to celebrate. With the men promising to throw her a party in the future, the men ask for Ivy's advice on who to speak to, especially since a corrupt noble is involved, but Ivy wonders if they can trust the guild master of the Adventurers Guild. With the men wanting to test out a theory, Ratlua, Berolda, and Caesar all escort Ivy to the Adventurers Guild, only for Rogleaf the guild master to greet the gang. With Sora confirming that Rogleaf can be trusted, we see Birksby, the captain of the Watchman party in town, and Vice Captain Agrop also confirmed to be trusted, seeing as they want to conceal Sora's existence. Berolda makes use of a random see-through stone to declare that everyone present is an ally, and seeing as they can use such an item to discern members from the evil organization, Rogleaf allows our gang to investigate fellow Watchmen members in case there are traitors. With Birksby and Agrop accompanying everyone, they take our gang to the location of the merchant house that was raided, but sadly the location hasn't yielded any clues. Seeing as Watchmen members guard the vicinity, Ivy greets Zakas, who is safe, but when Malgadula introduces himself, Sora begins to shake. With the men noting down Malgadula as a traitor, they head inside only to continue interviewing all the Watchmen present, and after speaking with all 157 Watchmen, the gang conclude that 38 of them are confirmed to be traitors. Out of nowhere, Count Faltoria and Lord Ferranda stop by to check in on everyone, but when Faltoria greets Ivy, Sora begins to quiver, whilst Ferranda seems to be clear. As the noblemen leave, Birksby begins to shake, seeing as the existence of a corrupt nobleman would explain how their plans had always been leaked, but Ivy points out how Falotria's appearance was too coincidental for them. The gang suspect that the enemy may be living close by as well, all suspecting that the kidnappers must have retreated to their secondary hideout when their current location was raided, but Ivy suspects that the Watchmen that have turned traitors are still hiding things in their location. With the gang heading to visit Malgadula's station, Birksby orders Malgadula to guard a different location, allowing the gang to investigate the room Malgadula has been guarding. As the men sift through the items in the room, they fail to come up with anything, but when Ivy spots a peculiar-looking bookshelf nearby, she heads to tug on the books, ultimately revealing a secret passage. Immediately, the gang confirm that the evil organization has amassed millions from the kidnapping they've performed, and seeing as the money and records present are more than enough proof to crack down on the organization, By orders for everyone to keep everything a secret, as they'll leave everything be for now, seeing as they need time to prepare. In the coming days, we hear that Barolda, Caesar, and the guild master have been meeting in secret, and the gang have Ivy and Sora to thank for their discovery. The men remind Ivy to never travel alone, leading Ratlua to accompany Ivy to do her laundry, intriguing Ivy to learn that the magic bucket she is using produces water infinitely and helps people who can't use magic. Seeing as it is the perfect time, Ratlua asks if Ivy is truly a boy, but Ivy admits that she has been concealing her gender to protect herself. Ratlua says he'll keep his secret, but out of nowhere Mira appears, offering to show Ivy a sweet store in town called Mamaroko. When Ratlua asks to tag along, Mira tries refusing, but Ratlua insists that they stop by Flo as well, forcing Mira to allow Ratlua to come as well, but it seems her twin brothers will also be escorting the gang. As both Mira and Ratlua have a stare down, we see them slowly approach each other, and as they swing out their arms, we see Ratlua win rock, paper, scissors against Mira. Just like that, everyone agrees to head to Flo like Ratlua had asked, and funnily we see the twins devouring the sweets they're served only to ask for seconds. Getting down to business, Ratlua demands to know why they were invited all of a sudden, but the twins utter that they simply wanted to treat Ivy to some sweets. Ivy still notices Sora quivering whilst around Mira and her brothers, prompting Ratlua to warn the trio to never harm Ivy. But the twins mention how their 2-star defense skill stands no chance against Ratlua's 3-star offensive skill. Mira tries calming everyone down, but the twins begin bashing Mira for having a useless 2-star taming skill that only works on slimes, something Mira can't help but accept. Standing up for Mira, Ivy cries that taming slimes and nurturing them takes a lot of work and effort, something that makes Mira feel better. The twins mention how their skills are what forced them to begin adventuring in the first place. And with Ivy and Ratlua parting ways with the siblings, Ratlua utters that the store owner of Flo is actually a friend of his and would have protected them if something happened. Ratlua reminisces on his youthful childhood, as things back then were more simple. But seeing as he has grown up, Ratlua says it is his duty to catch criminals to protect other kids wanting to live out their childhoods. That evening, Ratlua reports his encounter with Greengale, a bold move the men consider to be idiotic. Seeing as both the Flaming Sword and Thunder King are guarding Ivy, Ivy wonders what Greengale could be doing, but suddenly Ivy declares that Greengale is being used as decoys. Ivy says that the evil organization most likely wants to retrieve the loot they had left behind in the merchant home that was raided. So it seems they want to use Greengale to draw away the attention, and once the loot has been retrieved, it seems the organization will dispose of Greengale. Horrified by such a revelation, the men wonder how they can save the siblings. But Ivy says she can act as bait. Ivy suggests that she'll have Greengale come after her, whilst the watchmen purposely lower security at the merchant's mansion to draw in the kidnappers. That way the watchmen can catch and flush out the evil doers who attempt to retrieve the loot. Although the plan is enticing, the men refuse to put Ivy in such danger. But Ratlua promises to protect Ivy no matter what, plus they can time and restrict things to ensure Ivy isn't exposed to too much danger. The gang wonder how they should start spreading the false information to lure the organization back to the loot. Plus, the gang can use a sleep sphere to put both allies and enemies to sleep if a situation calls for it. Seeing as this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the gang get to work drafting up a plan, and not before long we see Rogleaf gathering together various adventurers to make an announcement. Rogleaf says the town is to guard Ivy no matter what, and when everyone heads to greet Ivy, Ivy and Sora begin discerning friend and foe. Starting with Aderically, Ivy immediately marks him as a traitor, and with introductions wrapped up, we follow Birksby, who seems to be on edge. Birksby tells Agrop that Barolda has been smiling more ever since he met Ivy. But out of nowhere, some of the Flaming Sword members report to Birksby that a monster has been spotted outside of town. With careful wording and subtle cues, Shafal convinces Birksby and Agrop to play along as they pull together a team of trusted allies to leave the vicinity. all whilst Ivy thanks Sora for a job well done. Rogleaf is seen ordering specific adventurers to remain on site for a special mission whilst the others are to disperse. But this allows Mira to thank Ivy for standing up for her the other day. With the twins reassuring Ivy that they'll protect her, Ratlua mentions how they should get sweets at the Mamaroko store Mira had suggested prior. But this idea makes Mira turn white. The twins seem to love the idea, and with Ivy signaling for Ratlua to play along, we cut back to Burst By, who asks the Flaming Sword members what is happening. Sadly, Shafal says they still can't divulge anything in case a traitor is listening in on them. Plus, Gabajala also appears to ask what is happening. Burst By simply utters that a lot of their men will be leaving to hunt down some monsters. Plus, Nuga suggests that Burst By allow his men to decide themselves who stays to guard the location and who leaves. With them now alone, Shafal unveils a sleep sphere that will entrap the criminals when they retrieve the loot, and with Shafal heading to set up the sleep sphere, Nuga shows off another powerful item they can use to suppress the enemy. Within a few moments, Burst By shows Barol to the team they pulled together, all whilst reporting that there are a decent amount of traders still stationed to watch over the merchant's home. Burst By is instructed to take his men as far away as possible to deal with the traitors in his pact, all whilst Thunder King and Flaming Sword rally together the traitorous adventurers and follow behind Burst By. At the same time, we see Mira showing Ivy a rundown store, a place she deems to serve the best sweets, inspiring our duo to play their part to buy the others some time. With the gang entering the store, we see Mira recommending Ivy to order the Danzu suite, only for Mr. Hag to begin preparing 5 Danzu orders for everyone. As Sora alerts Ivy to Hag being a bad person as well, we see Ratlua get to work as he utters that he has a secret mission for Green Gale given by the Guildmaster, all whilst Hag begins tampering with the sweets. Ratlua utters that a large number of Watchmen members and adventurers have been mobilized to deal with monsters that have appeared in the nearby forest. Therefore, he would like Green Gale to help guard the merchant's manor, but at the same time we see Hag drugging 2 of the 5 desserts. With Hag serving the gang their desserts, he begins sprinting out of the store to report what he just overheard, but this is all part of Ratlua's plan. Now alone, Ratlua calls out the siblings for being traitors, but when they try to deny such a thing, Ratlua orders that they taste the bowls that have been drugged. Cracking first, Mira asks her brothers to just confess, but the twins refuse, immediately springing into action as they equip their weapons. When the brothers attack Ratlua, Ratlua is easily able to defend and blow one of them to the side, reminding them that his skills surpass both of their offensive and defensive skills combined. When Ratlua sets one of the brothers on fire, the other brother quenches the flame with some water magic, only for both brothers to continue to rush Ratlua. Surprisingly, Mira calls for her slimes to attack her brother's swords and devour them, giving Ratlua an opening to knock the twins out. Ratlua and Ivy thanks Mira for ending things before it got too out of hand, and with Flaflo's owner arriving to check on the mess, we cut to the merchant's manor, where an army of masked men suddenly begin raiding the fort. With the Watchmen standing off with the attackers, we suddenly see one of the traitors sneaking some of the attackers inside the mansion, only to point them to where the loot is hidden. With the coast clear, we see Count Faltoria being escorted to the room containing the secret passage. But upon heading to retrieve his loot, various sleep spheres trigger only to release sleep gas that knocks out everyone within the mansion. At the same time, Birksby and Agroff are seen escorting his unit through the forest, all whilst the Flaming Sword and Thunder Kings follow behind their own adventurer pact. With it almost time to strike, Birksby shows off the item Shafal had prepared for them, and sensing that the pact is ready to betray them, Birksby makes the first move and fires off a massive net meant for monsters to restrain the traitors. Following up, Birksby electrifies the net to knock out the men, prompting Agroff to chase after those who are attempting to escape. With screams being heard, Flaming Sword and Thundering King get to work dispatching the traitors in their adventure pact, all ruthlessly decimating them. When Gabajala asks what Birksby is doing, Agroff simply electrocutes everyone to shut them up, but funnily Birksby admits that some of the captured watchmen are actually innocent. That evening, We see Ivy praised for coming up with a scheme to capture all the criminals amongst the watchmen and adventurers. At that moment, the arrogant Faltoria is seen being brought before everyone. But when Ferrando appears, Faltoria immediately corrects his attitude when he hears his evil doings will be reported to the royal capital. In the corner of their eyes, a crowd of people have appeared, all demanding for the criminals to be executed. Fearing that a riot may start, Birksby rushes to quell the crowd, and by promising to make the criminals slaves, Birksby is able to flawlessly silence and command the crowd. Ivy points out how Birksby had prevented the innocent townsfolk from attacking the criminals and becoming criminals themselves. But when Ivy says she wants to become a captain, just like Birksby one day, Ratlua and Shafal remind Ivy that she still has time to live out her childhood. Although the criminals have been captured, Birksby and Berolda declare they still have work to do, cutting to later that night where a gathering is held. The gang announces that everyone present was in the vicinity of the merchant's home, so they are to reveal everything they know about the criminals and the evil organization, and with Sora as their lie detector, Ivy gets to work interrogating everyone.